Now we've got a statement. Excellent. There we go. I've got it working. Then I have study here in this theory. And he was really okay. Sir. Welcome to the second. And my name is Eileen, and I am an alcoholic. Please join me in a moment of silent meditation. Be a scary. To reflect to Meredith, our discussion leader.
Hey, everybody. My name is Meredith. I'm an alcoholic. To be here tonight, we are in Bill's story. We're picking up the reading on page 9, but I like to just do a quick recap that from up to this point, we have learned, even just through the preface and the forwards, this is a textbook by which we can diagnose ourselves to see whether or not we are alcoholic. And those qualifiers are that we have an allergy to alcohol, which when we ingest it, it produces an abnormal reaction that does not affect most people. And that is in the form of a phenomenon of craving, which triggers more drinking, even if we don't want to. And then what happens is, as we develop this habit and become chronic alcoholics, we start to obsess about it in between bouts. Like, how am I not going to drink next time? Or how am I going to drink next time? Or I've got to stop drinking. Or, gee, I wish I could have just 2. And there's all this noise in our heads, which eventually drives us back to the drink because we're powerless over that thought. And it says if we're powerless over that thought, that we need a psychic change, a personality change sufficient to recover from alcoholism. And that is produced through the experience of the 12 steps. It is the most effective way that's known to man to date. And if followed, the directions are followed, which are outlined in this book, once we've decided we are this, then this will work if we do our best at it. And so they outline the book by putting that problem forward in the doctor's opinion. He goes to great lengths to explain it. And then we have Bill's story, which is like a written speaker meeting. He gives his experience, strength, and hope, in which we hope to find identification. We can also see the progression of the illness, just like ours progressed. You know, I didn't start out as a loser. I had to work at it. And then it gives us hope because we can change. We can recover through the seemingly hopeless state of mind and body by working these 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, which give us a new manner of living. All right, so we're in Bill's story to identify, and I like to ask, just to see if we're identifying so far, can someone raise their hand and tell me what they have highlighted on page 1 of Bill's story? Discovered liquor. It was around in my family, but once I drank it, I found it was a discovery. And I like where it says I was part of life at last. I didn't realize I didn't feel a part of life until I drank, and then I really felt like things were getting somewhere. Page 2. Anybody? Siobhan. Okay, so even early on in our drinking, we don't think it's a problem, but other people are already way before we think it's a problem, or we think it's just none of your damn business, right? It's already disturbing the people that love us. They're concerned. All right, page 3. Eileen.
Drink was taking an important and exhilarating part in my life.
Drink takes. Say that. It takes and takes and takes, and eventually without permission. Okay, so, yep, golf permitted drinking. And that's it. I was a bartender. It makes sense to me. Page 6. Yeah, I'm skipping.
All right. See if anyone's paying attention.
Some progression here. That's right.
And more
Yeah, unforgettable, but not so much. Because the pain and suffering of a week or a month ago doesn't creep into our minds. After a while, it's sort of a hazy recollection and not enough to keep me in check. It shouldn't be, right? My friend Miz, she and I got drunk when I was 16, and she retched on the lawn all the next day, and she barely drinks to this day, and she's 70. She's like, I can take it or leave it. And I just decided after all that retching, no more screwdrivers. Just gonna find a way around it. Page Jen. Okay, so Bill discovers through a doctor it's his, and I just heard this yesterday, it was his sister's husband who was the doctor, and he said your body and mind are weakened by alcohol, and it's actually part of your illness, and he didn't know that. He thought he was just a weak-willed loser. All right, page 8.
Oh.
Alcohol was my master. All right, so Bill admits he's powerless over alcohol. But we'll learn that that didn't keep him sober either, right? So even when we admit we're powerless, it doesn't mean we're at a point where we're not going to try yet another way to circumvent that powerlessness. And in fact, but later on that page, it says fear sobered him for a bit. Some people stay sober on fear for a good amount of time. My fear-based sobriety was 3 days. And then it just wasn't that impending anymore. It just kind of dimmed. All right. So we're picking up us to page 9. So Evie has come to show him up, visit him. Evie learns that he's in a bad way. And Evie has been saved by the drunk squad of the Oxford groups who have this method of getting people in touch with their inner selves and renders them sober. And he has 2 months sober, and he's doing his service to come now share this experience with Bill. And of course, Bill, seeing him sober after when he'd heard he was locked up for alcoholic insanity, just assumes he escaped. It can't be that he's better. He must have just busted out of there. So he's coming, and it talks about how he is fresh-skinned and glowing, and that's evidence of the psychic change, outward evidence of the inward change, inexplicably different. Can't put your finger on what happened, but something's different. And then he says that he got religion, but it was really a spiritual approach, but it was simplified by calling it religion. And it says, I was aghast, Bill was aghast. And the word aghast means to be filled with shocked amazement or terror. So Bill's like, not sure what's happened to his friend, but it's frightening. All right. And he's thinking he's going to go ranting now on a religious tirade.
But he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how 2 men had appeared in court, persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked.
Okay, so 2 months to the suffering alcoholic is a long time. Anybody here of 60 days or less? Does 2 months seem like a long time? Yes. All right. So it really gets his attention. We know how long 60 days and nights is without any kind of a solution, right? And so he's seeing evidence, and he talks about how this religious idea is combined with a practical action. And that was something we need. We need something to do about it. Otherwise, we feel so helpless. Okay, so he's already interested.
He had come to pass his experience along to me, if I cared to have it. I was shocked, but interested. Certainly I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. He talked for hours. Childhood memories rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat on this still Sunday. Way over there on the hillside, there was that proffered temperance pledge I never signed. My grandfather's good-natured contempt of some church folks and their doings. His insistence that the Spears really had their music, but his denial of the preacher's right to tell how he must listen. His fearlessness as he spoke of these things just before he died. These recollections welled up from the past that made me swallow hard.
Okay, so if I cared to have it. And that's what we do here. We lay out our experience for someone, and if they care to have it, they'll follow the directions that are offered. But they have to be willing to do that. And he was shocked and but interested. And I remember when my cousin sent me that pamphlet and started talking to me, I was shocked and interested because I knew what a case she'd been before. And I was like, wow, she is definitely different. And then he starts to talk to him. And what it gives Bill a chance to do is reminisce and think about what did he really think about God and how did it affect him? Now, his grandfather had a white light experience on the mountaintop near where he lived. And he came off that mountain and went into church and said, I've had a white light experience, and he never drank again. But he didn't do any steps or anything. He was a changed man from that moment. And so Bill had witnessed this in his grandfather, but his grandfather also didn't believe in religion, but still he had this thing. And it even talks about how the things he spoke of right before he died, he wasn't afraid to die. He believed he was going someplace, that his spirit was moving on. And that intrigued Bill. And it says, and these recollections made him swallow hard, which made him feel like he was going to cry. So it reaches into us a little bit. Somebody who can really talk about what it was like and what happened can reach into us where most people can't get to.
Do you have the plain language big book?
Yeah.
I wonder what it says about this. Because it's
Spears really had
there's a whole lot.
Yeah, I've got it on page
stuff that-
31. So, yep.
That might be hard for some peeps here to. I never
Yes,
heard that. But
I heard it in history yesterday, in a history thing yesterday.
never heard that.
He was saved from his own death. Why is this?
Childhood memories,
Yeah.
page 10. 10.
Well, and we got to go a little bit farther to pick up where this early language big book makes
Whatever.
more
All right.
sense.
That wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back again. I had always believed in a power greater than myself. I had often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are. For that means blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists, suggest vast laws and forces at work. Despite contrary indications, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay all. How could there be so much of precise and immutable law and no intelligence? I simply had to believe in a spirit of the universe, for who knew neither time nor limitation, but that was as far as I had gone. With ministers in the world's religions, I parted right there. When they talked of a God personal to me, who was love, superhuman strength, and direction, I became irritated and my mind snapped shut against such a theory.
This is really good stuff. So he talks about his memories from his own childhood. He remembers the preacher's voice. He remembered how his grandfather felt about religion. He believed there was a mystical force working in the world, but didn't want the preacher to tell him how to believe or how to act. He wanted to make up his own idea about God and religion. He didn't have any respect for people who went to church regularly. And he said they were just acting out what the preacher told him to do, and that wasn't really based in any kind of conviction. And then he says, I remember that day at the Winchester Cathedral. He went to that Winchester Cathedral when he was overseas because he realized he was all excited about being a soldier until he actually got into an area where there was evidence of war. Then he's like, holy cow, I might die over here. Now, actually, he was only there for 9 months. He got there in May and the war was over in December. But he still had a chance to get over there and see it, and he was afraid. And he went to God in this moments of fear. That's why he went to the cathedral. And he was humbly asking God to give him strength and courage, and he felt the presence of God when he humbled himself. So for him, that was a very powerful moment, even though that wasn't white light. He's deeply sensed the presence of God. And he says, I'd always believed in a power greater than myself. He said, I wasn't really an atheist. And he says, you know, I believe there was a God, but I had not made myself think of God's power or ability to help me. And see, that was my experience. I believed in God somewhere, but I didn't know that I could access that power to help me overcome my alcoholism. And this is how the approach was made. God is accessible, which was a whole new idea. And he says, when they're talking about, so he believed there must be a God, but he didn't trust preachers. He didn't trust ministers and religions. And when they talked about a love who was made of love and strength, talked about a God who was love and strength, I felt uncomfortable. Now, what I like about what he actually says here is, I had to ask he says, I'd often believed in a power greater than myself. I had often pondered these things. When do we ponder the existence of God? Look back on your life and ask yourself, when did I ponder? And I remember it's usually in very sublime moments. maybe an experience with my mom as a little kid going to church where I still really liked it and I loved the ritual and all that, and I hadn't become disenchanted with what was going on with the world. I couldn't link up what was happening in my family with God and where was he and all this. And also moments of desperation. When I'm out of options, God, I'll pray to God. I'll cry out to God. And so that's what Bill says. I often pondered him, and I wonder, when did Bill ponder? Probably in those moments where he thought, I'm hopeless, but we don't stay hopeless enough to be surrendered for long, usually. And then when it says, so I'd never gone much farther. And that's about self-sufficiency. I'm not going to say I'm going to depend or rely upon a power that I can't really believe is there or don't trust can help me. If I still have an inkling of strength to do it myself, no matter how messy or failed it looks to everybody else. I can think I'm doing okay with it. Other people saying, you're a train wreck. But as long as I'm piecing it together, I got it. And then, and I love here when it says, when they talked of God personal to me. And then I look at these adjectives, who is love, superhuman strength, and direction. Wouldn't it be great if we had all that? Really? I'd be like Wonder Woman. But he says, I don't understand this personal thing. And so what he says is, I became irritated and my mind snapped shut against such a theory. So God is a theory that demands our proof. We come in this door, we don't come looking for God, but it doesn't take long for us to find out it's about finding a relationship with God, right? But we're maybe at odds with God or don't even know where to begin with God. And yet we're told this is what's going to be the answer to our powerlessness. So for us who have no experience with that, it is just theory. And theories demand proof. And your proof might coax me along. My first sponsor, she definitely believed. And she said things like, did you hang the moon? No. Well, until we find out who did, we'll call that God. Things like that. So that she could break open my crusty shell and let me think of other things and not be so afraid to look again at God, who might be benevolent. And maybe eventually I'll understand more about why things happen the way they. But we all demand our own proof of our theory. We don't usually get enough of somebody else's proof and go, I'm convinced now. And that's why these steps help us experience something by uncovering the God within, the divine spark within all of us by taking all the garbage that's smothered it, all the calamity, all the disappointments, all the anger, all the resentments. Oh, yeah, that too. Fears, right? We do this emotional, spiritual surgery so that the divine spark can ignite again and connect us. Okay. So he's saying yes, no, actually, as Ebby's talking. In the beginning, yeah, I conceded, but not this. And yeah, it's this, but not a personal God. So Bill's kind of going back and forth on a lot of ideas that he's had throughout his life about interaction with a higher power. Anybody else have experience like throughout their lives? Yeah, God, no God, forget God. Great universal spirit.
Okay.
If they were playing on their phone. There's a lot of phone play tonight.
Okay. Those Zoomers.
Not just Zoomers.
Oh, okay. Okay, we got eyes up here. Okay. To Christ I conceded the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. His moral teaching most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded. The wars which had been fought, the burnings and chicanery, thank you, that religious dispute had facilitated, made me sick. I honestly doubted whether, on balance, the religions of mankind had done any good. Judging from what I had seen in Europe and since, the power of God in human affairs was negligible. The brotherhood of man a grim jest. If there was a devil, he seemed to be boss universal, and he certainly had me. But my friend sat before me, and he made the point-blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. Then he had, in effect, been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. Having had this power originated in him, obviously it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me at that moment, and this was none at all. That floored me. It began to look as though religious people were right after all. Here was something at work in the human heart which had done the impossible. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. Never mind the musty past. Here sat a miracle directly across the kitchen table. He shouted great tidings. I saw that my friend was much more than inwardly reorganized. He was on a different footing. His roots grasped a new soil.
Okay, so I watched this historical presentation on the early AA days yesterday, and the guy said, if you want accurate, detailed historical information, don't go to Bill, because he was writing something in a general way to promote this movement, and sometimes he would use the details to make a more compelling picture. Ebby tells it a whole different way, this connection, but he does say that Bill says the turning point was that Ebby came over and there was some spiritual intensity throughout, even though on the top of page 11, he's saying, yeah, okay, Christ's a good dude. No, God can't be around because of all the trickery and deceit and wars. And Boss Universal, those are capitalized letters. So here's Bill in his seemingly hopeless state of mind, giving the devil the foul, right? So in our state of mind, I was talking about this before the meeting. However, our state of mind goes the rest of our world. So he's in a bad state of mind. So obviously his world's not going to go well. But he then says, but he does say that Ebby is proof to him that there is something at work. And just like these shares we've heard tonight, we've seen God work through people that love us, or maybe some people that don't even know us, that somehow grab a hold of us and give us a different look at what be happening. And it says here that Ebby's visit caused something to change in him, and it stuck so well that in no waking moment thereafter could I get the man and his message out of my head. So the details are not important, right? Then he says, though, so it says his human will had failed. Like myself, he's identifying complete defeat. He's identifying alcohol was his master the page before, right? So it's coming in just the perfect time for Bill to have a new look at this. And it says, then he had been, in fact, been raised from the dead. It doesn't say he raised himself. So many times we see with people that love us hope that we will rouse ourselves from our lethargy, but we are unable to do it. But somebody else lifts us. And that's why it's important that once we are lifted, it's important that we lift too. You know, there's just not enough of us. And it says how had this power originated him, it couldn't have, because he had no more power than me, and that was none at all. And he says, never, my ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. Meaning there are something of 1,000 years ago. They are things that happen here and now with divine intervention. Inexplicable thing. I was told, look for things. And step 2 was all about look for things that come together for no reason, like the gun between the pillows and the mother who shows up with the help. There are divine interventions in our lives if we have look at them differently. And then he shouted great tidings. Of course, he didn't really shout. It was just such good news to him that it was breaking through his spirit. And then he says he saw that my friend was much more than inwardly reorganized. His roots grasped a new soil, no longer self-reliant. Now he's willing to rely on God, go in all this God. And John said earlier, we choose. It's going to tell us here, choose your own conception. We're not going to get to it tonight, but choose your own conception. We have a choice. God is either everything or else he is nothing. And I had to come to that decision and decide I'm an all or nothing person too. You know, I'm not going to be drinking Bailey's on the rocks if I go back out, you know, so I want all in. I never want the middle road. I want all in. And so we make that decision and then we move forward and take the action based on that and see where it leads. And that's our part in it. We have to decide to put our thinking, our beliefs, our old ideas aside and see if there's something new that might work. And that's right where Bill is, thanks to Ebby. And we're going to wrap it up at that point and start here next week. Thanks very much for a good meeting. Thank you, Gilmar.